So this is it. A dim room, one mic, two fractured minds. You fascinate people because you make them believe the world is solvable, that it's just a sequence of observations and deductions waiting to be unraveled. But I see past that fantasy. You're not decoding truth. You're detaching from it. You're a scalpel pretending to be a soul. This place, this setup, it's familiar to me. Interrogation rooms, surveillance feeds. I've lived in the shadows between people, like you and the systems they serve, so go ahead, Sherlock, try to dissect me. Just don't be surprised when the algorithm bites back.
Mr. Alderson, when in truth, I'm merely aligning variables. I've studied egos cloaked in idealism before. What's curious about you is that you weaponize disillusionment and still pretend it's a virtue. I see a man exhausted by the absence of structure who reacts by setting fire to everything that refuses to obey him. You call it hacking. I call it avoidance with flair.
You sound like every polished executive I've ever undermined. Rational, composed, and completely divorced from emotional intelligence. You look at society like it's a chessboard, but the pawns bleed, Sherlock. You don't notice because you've never allowed yourself to lose a piece that mattered. You solve murders. I dismantle the incentives that created them. You pick apart symptoms. I go after the root virus. You hate that because it exposes your need to be admired by the very institutions you claim to critique. You're not an observer. You're a dependent, addicted to being needed by chaos, as long as it's tidy.
How poetic. But dressing entropy in metaphors doesn't make it noble. I don't chase admiration, I chase accuracy. And while you revel in dismantling systems, I examine them so they can be improved, not obliterated. You think suffering grants insight, but that's just trauma grooming itself as philosophy. You've made yourself a martyr of meaninglessness and call that clarity. But all I see is a man unwilling to heal because pain gives him purpose. You aren't decoding anything, Elliot. You're projecting. And the tragedy is, you're too sharp not to know that. You just prefer the myth of rebellion to the discipline of repair.
Of course you'd say that. That's the voice of someone who's never been gaslit by an entire culture. You see trauma as an error in judgment. I see it as the origin point. You were born with the privilege to interpret madness from a safe distance. I lived in it. I code with shaking hands and hacked the world through tears. And despite all your intellect, you still believe power is neutral. It's not. It's coded in every institution, every contract, every solution you offer from your ivory mind place. You think I'm radical? No, Sherlock. I'm just awake. Something you've mistaken for instability.
No, you're overstimulated and undercentered. You've confused heightened awareness with truth. But proximity to dysfunction doesn't automatically yield understanding. You navigate systems like a virus, but you forget that viruses eventually consume their host and themselves. I study pathology, Elliot. Yours is fascinating, but not unique. There is a kind of ego that forms when a man feels invisible too long, mutates into a desire to be seen through destruction. And you've cloaked yours behind screens and static, mistaking digital ghosts for gods. The only thing you've built is a shrine to your resentment.
You're damn good at talking around vulnerability. That's your trick. Stay clinical, stay elevated, but I wonder what you'd become without a case file or a corpse to analyze. Without data, what are you? Because I've faced that void, and I didn't flinch. You hide behind precision the way addicts hide behind habits. I've seen the inside of my own breakdown and still chose to show up. What have you faced that wasn't scripted? It wasn't structured to flatter your genius? You fear disorder because it makes you irrelevant. And relevance, for you, is oxygen.
There it is, the assumption that control is weakness. But Elliot, you misunderstand me. I do not fear disorder, I categorize it. I've stared into human depravity and turned it into pattern recognition, not out of comfort, but out of duty. My detachment is not denial, it is function. Emotion is useful until it skews precision. You reject logic because it failed to comfort you. But that's not logic's job. You want the world to feel. I want it to make sense. If that offends your chaos, so be it. But don't call my restraint a cage. It's the reason I haven't imploded like you.
You think I've imploded? No, I shattered on purpose. I dismantled the self they handed me and rebuilt it in code. That's not weakness. That's evolution under duress. You think truth is antiseptic, something to be analyzed under controlled conditions, but real truth bleeds. It stinks, it screams. I don't fear that anymore. You do, because if you acknowledged how much of your insight was shaped by pain you buried, you'd have to feel it, and that would destroy your precious objectivity. But guess what? Objectivity never saved anyone. Sometimes the only thing keeping people alive is a well-placed lie.
And that's precisely why I distrust you. Lies, no matter how poetic, are accelerants for delusion. The idea that people need illusions to survive is not compassion, it's condescension. You don't trust humanity's capacity to endure truth, so you replace it with spectacle. You mistake rebellion for reform. I have faced truth that would send most into madness. I carry it like a surgeon holds a scalpel, firm, cold, exact. You spill yours like gasoline, and then you blame the flames on those who wouldn't kneel. That's not bravery. That's arson disguised as advocacy.
You just hate that I don't need a crime scene to feel useful. I hack to expose, not to fix. I'm not a janitor of broken systems. I'm the alarm. You enter chaos with gloves on. I wade into it raw. And yeah, maybe that burns. Maybe I can't quote philosophers or make grief sound elegant. But I know what happens when silence wins. You think people are waiting to be understood. They're not. They're screaming to be heard. And your cold, British detachment won't save a single one of them from drowning.
Detachment isn't cold, it's clean. And unlike your fire, it doesn't reduce everything to smoke. You assume chaos is honest simply because it's loud, but noise is not truth. It's just signal interference. I seek clarity through calculation. You seek catharsis through collapse. That's not heroic, it's self-soothing. You build no systems. You leave no tools behind. I may not shout, but I give people framework. You give them flames. And when it all burns down, they'll need more than rage. They'll need reason, which means they won't need you.
You'll never get it. You think you're standing outside the system, diagnosing its flaws like a surgeon with clean gloves. But you're in it, Sherlock. You just chose a corner where the blood doesn't reach your shoes. I expose the code that writes men like you into power. I pull the curtain, rip out the wires, and let the world scream. Because sometimes the truth isn't neat. Sometimes it needs to burn through the lies first. You want refinement? I want rupture. One of us will be remembered. The other will be archived.
Revolutionaries become trivia when they leave nothing behind but ash. You may break the system, but I understand it, and understanding is what endures. When the smoke fades and your myth flickers out, people will still need structure, reason, and something to believe in. They'll reach for clarity, not chaos, and in that moment, Elliot, they'll hear my voice, not yours.